And today I'm going to talk about dualistic selves and what do they mean in regards to the psychology that I talked about last time. And for some of you who may not know about what are dualistic selves, please check out my last video on psychology and the selves. I mentioned a couple of times the dualistic selves that kept you in a closed system. So today I'm going to talk about the dualistic selves that keeps you in a closed system and why do they keep you in a closed system. So what are dualistic selves? Well, to make it simple, in this world, the Buddha says we live in pairs. So if you look at the world today, there is good, but also there is evil. There is dark, but there is light. And there are rich people, and there are also poor people. So you see that in this world you have these pairs, and they operate together to give you that experience, the contrasting experience. So if you want to feel rich, what do you need to contrast to? Because if you don't have anything to contrast to, you don't even know that you feel rich. There was once a movie I watched that Michael J. Fox started, that he was saying that he came from a farmland, and then when he went to the big city, when he was in the farmland, he doesn't know anything about being rich or poor. He was provided, so he doesn't feel rich and he doesn't feel poor. But when he went to the big city to try to make it for himself to be rich, then he started to realize that he was poor, because now he can see the contrast between rich people and poor people. And if you don't have a lot of money, you feel poor. And so that's the contrast aspect of the duality consciousness. And that's caused by the dualistic selves that we have in us. So if you come, so for example, that the character Michael J. Fox that I mentioned, when he was living in the countryside, he didn't feel like he was poor. But when he went into the city, he felt he was poor, because now he could contrast himself against the rich people. And when he does that, he created the selves, allowing him to contrast to the rich people. And so, but by that time, in the movie, he became rich because he was trained as a business person, and he found ways to be creative enough so that he become rich. And then when he became rich, he no longer feels poor, because now he created these selves that made him feel rich. But how does he feel rich? Is to contrast himself, his wealth, against those who are poor. And that's how he can see the difference between rich and poor, his experience of being rich, because he can contrast that to people who are poor. And in hindsight, if you look at the world today, there is a wealth gap, a wealth inequality, where the rich gets richer and the poor gets poorer. Well, think about this. If the rich are getting richer, the only way they can feel richer is for the poor to feel poorer. So in this system, There's always one group of people that will always feel rich, and the other group of people that will always feel poor. And you have this contrast, but this contrast, if you see it realistically, is just a contrast. If you strip out the wealth, two people are equal. The only difference between the two groups of people is that one group of people are rich and the other groups of people are poor. So these selves will make you, the selves that you created, to have the experience of being rich or to have the experience of being poor, are created temporarily to give you that experience. You can always change. You can always want to have the experience of being poor, and then you can switch to having an experience of being rich. And many people have done that. Many people started being poor, and then they realize, oh, I work hard, I be smart, I be creative, and then I'm able to create a business. And of course, when you create a business, you become rich because now you create products that people want to buy, and there's income, there's money coming in, and now you become rich. So you turn yourself from being poor into feeling rich. But this is just a contrast that you created in this system between rich and poor. And we can do the same with evil and good. There are good people and there are evil people. It doesn't mean that the evil people doesn't exist or the poor people doesn't exist, but when there are good people, there are always evil or bad people. So you have this system that you created, that you have the contrast between two opposites. And in this kind of arrangement, these two opposites sometimes will fight among each other. The good fight against the bad, the rich, the poor fighting to topple the rich. And these selves will make you feel that you are compelled to act, because you feel that it's in you that if you feel poor, you are compelled to act either to steal from the rich or to condemn the rich or to work hard to become rich. So these are the reactionary patterns that people have when they are focused on these separate dualistic selves, because these selves can only do one thing, is to be either one or the other. There is nothing in between. And so, for example, the story that I talked about, Mike and Jane, whenever you have a trauma or experience a trauma, you tend to create these dualistic selves. These cells are there to prevent you from re-experiencing the trauma again. So it will say, these are good things, so you won't experience the trauma. These are the bad things. They may trigger you to experience the trauma again. So in terms of Mike, he has to tell a lie. But whenever there are things that he hears that might expose the truth, then Mike says, no, these things I shouldn't be hearing. These things are not good. These are bad things that makes me feel bad. But really, it's those things that will expose Mike to the truth, that he can now speak the truth. And the same with Jane. So whenever Jane wants to be personally creative, maybe sees some inspiration that inspires her to be creative, she will then think about, oh, I don't want to be creative by myself. I'm okay with taking other people's creativity and make it better. Or maybe claim it as my own because it's someone else's creativity or someone else's new ideas. I'll take it and then I make it better and claim it as my own. But if I were to create my own creativity, not take from someone else, that's a bad thing because it will help Jane remind her of the time that she was put down by her parents because her own creativity was rejected. So anything that remind Jane that her own creativity can be rejected, Jane will try to forget it or make it think that those things are bad. Because the selves, the separate selves, the dualistic selves, will make her feel emotionally bad that those creative ideas being created personally by Jane are bad things, will put her in a bad situation. So in order for her to transcend that kind of experience, both Mike and Jane have to recognize that the experiences that they are experiencing are caused by those dualistic selves. Because Mike and Jane cannot see anything other than left or right or wrong. You know how it is when you look at certain things, you want to look at it with a neutral state of mind, with a mind that not only that you see two answers, two choices, you want to see other choices, other answers. But if you are being succumbed by these dualistic selves, there's only two answers that you can see, two pairs of answers that you can see, either good or bad, right or wrong. They're the enemy or they're my friends. So you don't have that ability to see other potential solutions and choices. So if you don't see or you are not able to see other potential answers or solutions to your problem, chances are it's a pretty good chance that there are dualistic selves in you that are controlling your life. So what I'm trying to say is just be aware that any trauma that you experience in your childhood or in your past lives can create these dualistic selves that'll make you prevent or make you not try to see the answers or the trauma that you've experienced in the past as a safety mechanism, as a way for you to safely not experience the trauma again. But of course, that limits your life because in the case of Mike, he cannot speak the truth because whenever he feels he's compelled to speak the truth, he'll face these separate selves, these dualistic selves, that tells him that no, you're not allowed to speak the truth because speaking the truth will make you feel bad, worse. And so Mike then goes back and say, no, maybe I should tell a lie, continue telling a lie. So this has implications because right now our society, majority of people in our society are controlled by their own dualistic separate selves. And that they couldn't see an answer other than right or wrong. So even when you're trying to tell them, say for example, you see a housing bubble. You can see because you're not affected by greed or by poverty, that you are able to see, because you are in the open system, many potential causes and many potential drivers that create this housing bubble. You can see it because you're not only seeing one or two answers, you can see many potential answers that's causing the bubble. Of course, you're happy and you want to tell other people because you're very concerned that other people are sucked into this housing bubble, which happened in the United States in 2007. But prior to that, nobody really feel that the mortgage market would collapse. And people believe the mortgage market couldn't collapse because history has shown that people will continue paying off the mortgage. It just wouldn't collapse. It's impossible to collapse. But then again, they're seeing only two answers. It couldn't collapse because it is too big to fail. And that's all they could see. But for someone who's outside the closed system, in the open system, and are not affected by the dualistic selves, that someone can see more than two answers. And of course, that someone will tell the people who are affected, who are in this bubble, hey, you should get out of this bubble. But many people won't, because they can only accept, because their selves can only understand one or the two answers. And for many people, they have to go through the crash of the mortgage market, which is the great financial crisis in 2008. And sadly, many people lost their homes and lost a lot of money. It could have been prevented if they would have acted neutrally, taken the advice that the mortgage market was in the bubble. But they couldn't, because they just couldn't see any answer outside of the pairs of whether this is a bubble or whether it is not. But they couldn't see any other answers outside of that two answers, two choices. So these people are stuck in this kind of duality pairs. And what made them stuck? It's again psychology. Psychology, or the trauma that made them took on a certain psychology that ignore the mortgage bubble. One of the things that might be the cause is that when you feel poor, you want to be rich. And when you see an opportunity for you to make a lot of money, easy money, say you just buy many homes and you put little money down, and it's so easy to make money, and you've been making quite a bit of money through speculation, through home speculation, and you don't think that it could collapse, because you don't think that. It's only either it would continue on or would collapse. But you think that if everybody does the same thing, how could it collapse? It wouldn't. But it's driven by the sense of lack, poverty consciousness, that I am not as rich as someone who is a real estate mogul who makes millions of dollars. But I can do that because that person made the money from real estate. So if I do the same thing, I would make money from real estate. But they don't think for the fact that if millions of people do the same thing, how can everyone become rich? How can everyone become millionaires? Only a few people can become millionaires because the system can only accommodate a few that can make millions. But everybody else, remember, they are pairs. So a few people make millions, and that contrasts to many that will lose money that will give the money to the few that made the millions. So it's a transfer of wealth. So this is how the pairs work. They transfer the wealth from the poor to the rich. So if you're lucky and you made some money out of this bubble, then you're one of those that got out of the speculation early enough and keep your money. But for those who weren't lucky and got out late from the speculation, lost the money. So in this dualistic condition, there's always one that wins and the other that loses. And you'll see this in history too, that there's always one group of people that usually wins and the other group of people that usually loses. And it just so happens that the group of people who embraces God's laws are the ones who are victorious. Basically, people who sees the truth, woke up, and realizes that you can't really have a system that have one side, one group of people that always wins and the other group of people that always loses. They realize that the only system that works well is a system where it's open and everyone works together as a community, as a member of the community. And when everyone works together, wealth is shared among everyone. The benefits of the many are shared together. And you don't have this disproportionate amount of wealth distributed only for the few, and the many don't have that wealth. And you can see that even in dictatorial countries or countries that want to keep the wealth to the few, eventually that wealth is then spread equally or fairly among a larger group of population. And this is where democracy somehow always wins. Because really democracy is not based on the pairs, it's based on equality. So for me, in my experience, I know that sometimes when I feel compelled, say, to compete, to try to win, I go into this mindset that I have to win at all costs. But that usually means that it makes me a person with few friends, because everybody else thinks that, well, David always wants to win. Doesn't feel like David wants to share, or David wants to be among us. He wants to be special. And when you have that kind of selfish or that kind of self-centered drive, it's the ego that's doing it. So when you have those separate selves, you have to have a container that contains the selves. And in the dualistic selves, the ego is very selfish, self-centered. So when you have this idea, only to be rich, then you have this idea that it's only for you. You want to be rich, it's only for you. Whereas when you overcame the dualistic selves and the selfish ego, and you become selfless, even though you want to be rich, You always think, how can I benefit the whole? Yes, I can make myself rich, but wouldn't it better that if I make myself rich and benefit the whole as well? So you run a company and then it helps you make a lot of money, but also you want to share that profit, that wealth with your employees. That works because then your employees will work with you, will help you even make more money because your employees feel well taken care of. There's that sense of community. My boss is taking care of me, so I want to help my boss make more. I want to help the company become stronger. So it's when you have that sense of community, when everybody works together, there is that sense of wealth generated together. All of us don't feel poor. But when there is a sense of selfishness, there's always one group of people that always feel rich, want to keep the wealth to themselves, and then a different group of people want to be rich because they're poor, and so they have to fight among the rich and try to be rich. And these are the selves that actually the selves are fighting among each other, not the people. The selves are fighting each other because they come from a sense of lack. They have a lack of resources, so they always feel that I'm in a sense of lack. I don't feel like I'm enough or I'm complete. That's another thing that you can see from people who have this dualistic selves, that I don't feel complete, that I know I need to have, I know I need to get more, I need to own more. So these are typically the dualistic selves that will act in that way. So that's it for now. Thank you for subscribing to my channel, and thank you for listening to my talk. I'm going to enjoy the day, and I hope you can enjoy your day as well. Please come back, and I'll have some more talks to share with you next time. Until then, David saying goodbye.